Thank you. So on one of my first trips to the James River, just a few blocks away from here, I was introduced to a game that I now call Sink or Swim. Now this game had one simple rule: to jump into the rapids of the river and swim as fast as possible against the tide to avoid getting swept away. Smart idea, right? So here I was standing on top of this very large rock, and all of my friends jumped into the rapids and they started racing one another. Now I don't know if it was my surf boy California background, an insane sense of spontaneity, or just a leap of faith, but I closed my eyes and I jumped. Needless to say, that was the last time I played that game. But what I've realized is that college presents so many opportunities for students to take those leaps into new experiences. Whether with that insane sense of spontaneity or with a purpose. College students can explore their academic interests through classes. They can pursue opportunities related to their career goals. They can form new social relationships through social organizations on campus, and they can even give back to their local communities through a number of outreach initiatives. But what we've realized is that although there are so many opportunities for college students to make those diverse leaps into new experiences, there really aren't opportunities for students to engage in international service, to make some sort of meaningful and sustainable impact to an international cause, to highlight the power that young adults have to make a change in the world, to make some sort of impact on an international cause like malnutrition, sanitation, armed conflict, or preventable disease. And understandably, part of the reason why an international service abroad model has not been created for college students is because of two primary barriers. The first is time. As college students, we're busy taking classes or preparing for our careers, so it doesn't really seem practical to have students take time off from their educations, whether it's months or years, and go to another country and commit to a service project. And so the second barrier is a lack of skills. We may be working towards degrees in medicine, public health, law, international relations, you name it, but we don't actually have those degrees yet. And so it's difficult to justify giving inexperienced students the opportunity to commit to some sort of international service project and participate in that project for a number of years. And so because of these two obstacles, a sustainable international service project has not been created for college students. But at the same time, colleges and other organizations have attempted to overcome these barriers by creating short-term service abroad trips, to give students a little bit of a flavor of what it's like to live in a developing country. And by all means, these service projects can be very beneficial to students because they can act as motivating agents to propel them towards careers in international aid. But at the same time, these trips are often expensive, up to a few $1,000s per trip. They're short-term. Oftentimes these trips are maybe 1 or 2 weeks during December break, during spring break, and so students don't really have the opportunity to engage in a long-term, sustainable international cause. And once these students return from their trips, they often lose the connection with the country that they did service in, simply because they're not in that country anymore, and they're not actually doing that service project anymore. And finally, these trips often allow students to observe skills, not actually practice skills, not to really use their hands and make some sort of meaningful impact to an international community that they can call their own. And so the question that I struggled with was, how do we give college-age young adults the chance to engage in an international service project that is both sustainable and meaningful? And so as I struggled with this question, I also started to kind of work to create that chance for college students with a close friend of mine. And so we wanted to find an international cause that could be entirely pioneered and led by students, a cause that could highlight the power that young adults have to affect change in the world, but also a cause that wasn't really brought up on a regular basis on a global level. And so after months of research, my partner and I found that perfect international cause: youth empowerment, specifically of adolescents who have been impacted by HIV and AIDS in Africa. From our research, we found that individuals who are HIV positive in Africa experience several forms of social stigma. The social stigma can be something as sad as rejection or isolation by family members, being denied access to local institutions like churches, or even being barred from healthcare resources due to the belief that these individuals are not worth helping. Even though we know that's not true today. If a person is HIV positive and he or she receives their medications, their antiretroviral medications on a regular basis, then that individual can live a lifespan that is equivalent to that of an individual who is not infected. And so it's really these forms of social stigma that is the reason why so many individuals are afraid to go to HIV clinics in Africa to get tested for HIV. It's also a reason why people who are already infected with HIV are afraid going to HIV clinics to get their medications on a regular basis. And it's also why some people may avoid using condoms during sex, because the desire to use condoms may imply that a person is HIV positive, whether or not that may actually be true or not. And so because of all of these factors that really stem, at least partially from the social stigma of HIV infection, there are countries in Africa that experience very high HIV prevalence rates. We specifically focused on Swaziland, a very small country that's encompassed by South Africa, population's about 1.5 million people, because it has one of the highest HIV prevalence rates in the world. 1 out of every 4 adults in that African country of Swaziland is HIV positive. And 15% of all adolescents who are born to HIV positive mothers will be HIV positive themselves. And so, given all this shocking information, we were surprised that there wasn't a single cohesive vehicle that could help to eliminate that social stigma, while at the same time empowering adolescents who have been impacted by HIV/AIDS towards bright futures, to help them understand that they too are just normal kids and that their disease does not really define them. So we had found our international cause, but we didn't really know how we could mobilize college students towards it. Like I said earlier, we didn't want to send college students on these short-term service abroad trips. We were looking for a sustainable solution, but we weren't sure how to find that. And so as I struggled to find that sustainable solution, I also worked closely with UNICEF at VCU's UNICEF chapter as president, where we educated, advocated, and fundraised on behalf of a whole host of child welfare-based issues. And through all of our activities, we sort of came up with a mantra that we call think globally, act locally. This idea that college students have the ability to make an international impact without ever leaving their own campuses. And so applying that mantra, we came up with an idea that would allow us to engage college students to empower these impacted adolescents in Swaziland without ever having to leave their own campuses. And that idea was quite simply a pen pal program, one that would strike a meaningful conversation between United States college students and pen pals in Swaziland, those adolescents, that would allow for a safe medium through which these adolescents can share their thoughts, their feelings, their fears, their beliefs, without actually having to worry about the social stigma that exists within their own local communities. Each adolescent would participate in this pen pal program for a period of several months, and then they would be given the opportunity to brainstorm some sort of service project that they can do within their local communities. And then we as an organization would provide them with the resources and the support to make those service projects a reality. The idea behind those service projects was to give these adolescents the opportunity to do some locally directed service, while at the same time helping local community members recognize that these adolescents can also do something pretty cool and pretty meaningful within their communities. And so the idea of a pen pal program really addresses the first barrier to international service for college students that I talked about earlier, that time. Because we're not sending students on short-term abroad trips. We're not sending them on long-term abroad trips. We're keeping them right here, and we're giving them the power to empower adolescents through writing. In a way, it's even more effective because these college students will remain connected one-on-one with their adolescents for a period of almost a year. Now, we understood at the same time that this kind of a program does not actually address the second barrier to international service for college students, which is the lack of skills. And so we found that it would be kind of ineffective to tell a college student, here is your adolescent in Swaziland, now go empower them, right? I think that would be a little bit of a train wreck. So we came up with a webinar training series that would allow for our college students to be educated on all aspects of HIV infection, while at the same time learning how to become empowerment catalysts for the program. So now we're giving these college students the skills through an education that they can actually apply to this pen pal program when they become volunteers and when they connect with their adolescent in Swaziland. And so this idea, I can proudly say, is now a reality in the nonprofit organization that I started, PENdulum Global. Because we've given students the opportunity to pursue and develop an interest in international welfare without ever leaving their own campuses, right from their dorm rooms. In what we call a local service abroad model, we've given the opportunity for students to learn some skills and actually apply those skills in a long-term and sustainable manner at absolutely no cost to them. And so what's unfortunate about this is just one opportunity that college students really have to make that meaningful and sustainable impact to an international cause. We need more opportunities. And so I leave you here with one thought. If we give college-age young adults the ability to make those leaps into international service at an early stage in their careers, and if we can empower those students to think globally and act locally, then we can give birth to a generation that puts global concerns at a top priority so that every person, every child, anywhere has the ability to live, to learn, to laugh, and to leap. Thank you very much.